I sat in the cold, sterile hospital room. The rhythmic beep of the machines, the only sound breaking the silence. Henry's frail, cancer-ravaged body lay in the bed, still and pale. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one more labored than the last. I'd been here every day for months, watching him fight a battle no one seemed to want to win. The chair I sat in was too small, too hard, but I didn't dare move, not now, not with him slipping away. My mind kept drifting to Laura, my wife, and the hole in my chest that seemed to widen every day. She hadn't come, not once. Not in the weeks Henry had been fighting for his life. And her siblings? They were ghosts, completely absent. I'd called them, begged them, but all I got were dead air and voicemail. It felt like a cruel joke, watching a man withering away while my own family pretended nothing was happening. The nurse came in with a clipboard, her face tight with the kind of professional sympathy that barely masked her discomfort. She gently touched my arm and said the words I already knew were coming. "He's gone." I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't even want to look at Henry's face anymore. Not after everything he'd endured. The last thing I wanted was to sign some stupid form that said he was dead. But someone had to do it. It wasn't like anyone else was going to show up. She handed me an envelope. "This is from Mr. Henry," she said. "He asked that you not open it until after—" Her voice trailed off, as if there was a clear understanding between us that this moment didn't need words. I slipped the envelope into my pocket, still holding Henry's hand. It felt unnatural, the skin cold and thin under my fingers. I had no family here, not his, not mine, just me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The silence pressed in. The nurse lingered, offering condolences, but we both knew. She wasn't sorry for Henry. She was sorry for me, for the guy who'd been left holding the bag. "Do you need anything else?" she asked, her voice gentle, but the question hung in the air like a quiet judgment. I shook my head. "No," I said, the word barely audible. I didn't need anything. I just needed to understand why, after all this time, I was the only one who seemed to care. I don't remember the drive home, but I know it was long. The weight in my chest didn't lift, not even when I hit the highway and the city lights blurred into streaks of yellow and white. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the tightness in my fingers almost matching the knot in my stomach. I tried calling Laura again. No answer. The voicemail was the same as the others. "Laura, it's me. I'm at the hospital. It's over. Dad's gone." My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "Please, pick up. I need to talk to you." But I knew she wouldn't. She hadn't. Not once. I hit end on the call and slammed my hand on the steering wheel, a quick, sharp burst of anger. It was a strange thing, feeling this kind of rage after a death, like I should be grieving, not furious. But here I was, alone in the car, more pissed off than I'd been in months. When I pulled into the driveway, Laura's car was parked exactly where it always was. But the house felt hollow, empty. Not even the sound of the TV flickering on in the living room, or the smell of dinner in the air. It was like I was walking into a house I didn't belong in, like it wasn't mine anymore. I stood there for a second, staring at the door before I stepped inside. I tossed my bag onto the couch and kicked my shoes off, the heaviness of my body sinking into the familiar but now foreign space. I didn't see Laura anywhere. Then my eyes fell on the letter. It was tucked under my bag, the edges of the envelope peeking out. My hand instinctively went for it, even though I'd promised myself I'd wait. But at that point, I didn't care. The envelope was thick, the paper textured and old, like something you'd get from an attorney's office. I opened it, and the contents were simple, just a key and a scrap of paper with a cryptic address. The address didn't mean anything to me, some rural road outside the city. I felt my stomach tighten again, and I ran my thumb over the key. What was this? Why had Henry left this for me? And why had he made it clear that I couldn't open it until after he was gone? I sat down at the kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing in, and turned the key over in my hand. I'd spent years doing everything I could for Laura's family, picking up the slack where her siblings didn't, being the one to clean up the messes, to keep things from falling apart. But this felt like something I wasn't supposed to know, like I was being shut out of whatever was happening in their world. The whole situation stank of secrets, and I was getting fed up. Why hadn't any of them been here? Wasn't this their father? Hell, wasn't this supposed to be our family? I couldn't shake the bitter taste in my mouth. I didn't have answers, and the more I thought about it, the more it felt like I was the last one to know anything that mattered. I ran my finger over the paper again, tracing the address. A forgotten property? Or maybe it was just some place Henry had used to escape them? Escape me. But why would he leave it to me? I stood up, my mind racing. Whatever this was, whatever this property or message meant, I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. Maybe I was too angry to think straight, but something about the whole thing felt off. Henry had been clear with me. This was my responsibility now. Whatever he was trying to tell me, it was something bigger than just a house or a plot of land, and I wasn't about to let it go unanswered. I grabbed my keys, feeling the weight of the key in my hand. Whatever was waiting for me at that address, I was going to find out. I had no other choice. The gravel crunched under my tires as I turned down the road. The farther I went, the more desolate it felt. The trees closed in, thick and untamed, like they were trying to swallow the road whole. There were no street signs, no houses, just emptiness. This place, it was nowhere. My gut twisted. The cottage appeared out of nowhere, just off the side of the road. It was more run down than I expected, the paint peeling, the porch sagging under years of neglect. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time and everyone else. There was nothing welcoming about it. The windows were boarded up, and the overgrown weeds looked like they hadn't been cut in decades. I parked the car and stepped out. The air cooler here, the silence heavier. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you're trespassing, even when you know you're not. I took a deep breath and headed toward the door, the key in my hand cold against my palm. It wasn't much of a house anymore. The walls had that musty smell, the floors creaked under my weight, and dust hung thick in the air. The place was falling apart, but I could still see it. This was where Henry had lived. Lived. It didn't feel like a home, though. It felt like an escape. I had no idea how long he'd been here, but it sure as hell wasn't recent. The last time I'd seen him, he'd been confined to a hospital bed, barely able to breathe. Yet, here, in this place, there was no sign of life. Not in the house, not in the family. As I moved through the rooms, something inside me tightened. What was this place to him? There was a sort of sadness, a quiet despair clinging to the walls. It was as though Henry had wanted to hide away here, far from the family that had left him to rot. I stopped when I found a second envelope, hidden on the desk. It was addressed to Laura's lawyer. I almost didn't want to open it, but I had to. This whole situation was unraveling in ways I couldn't understand, but I was damn sure going to try. I tore it open quickly, and inside, there was a document that made my stomach churn. It was a statement of Henry's estate, and the number written on it. Jesus. This wasn't just some small inheritance or little savings account. It was enough to make my head spin. Millions of dollars in assets, investments, property, savings, all of it far beyond anything I could have imagined. And none of it was listed for Laura, or her siblings. I sat down heavily in the rickety chair by the desk. What the hell was Henry thinking? Then there was the last note tucked in between the papers, a simple request to speak with the lawyer, alone. Not with his children, not even with his wife, just the lawyer. What kind of man leaves his family behind like this? I leaned back in the chair, trying to make sense of what I was holding. Everything about this was strange. Henry had always been quiet, reserved, but this felt like something more, like he'd been pushing his family away long before he got sick. Maybe he was protecting himself. Maybe he'd just gotten tired of the abandonment. But what did that have to do with me? The weight of it all was sinking in. Henry had trusted me, not his kids. Me. Why? Had he seen something in me that I hadn't even recognized? Had I been the only one he could count on? My mind was spinning in circles, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I actually knew about the man. Henry had played his cards close to his chest, but now I was the one holding them. I closed the envelope and slipped it back into my jacket pocket. Whatever was going on, this wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about something bigger. Henry had lived like a ghost, and now he had left me with the pieces of his life to put together. But what was I supposed to do with them? I walked into Evelyn Keller's office feeling like a ghost. The heavy door shut behind me with a soft thud, and there she was. Evelyn Keller, the lawyer. She was older than I imagined, her gray hair neatly pulled back, her face kind but stern. She didn't offer a smile, just a quiet nod as she gestured for me to sit. Her office smelled like leather and old paper, the kind of place you imagine people come to when they've run out of time. "Mr. Brad Thompson," she said, her voice steady, almost soothing. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I muttered, still feeling like I was half in a dream. I had no idea what to expect, but I sure as hell wasn't ready for what came next. She opened the will. Henry was very clear about his wishes. He wanted it read in front of you, but unfortunately none of his children are present. They were invited, she added, her tone careful, as if she was choosing her words. But none of them showed up. I swallowed hard, staring down at the papers on the desk. Laura, her siblings. It stung to hear it out loud. They didn't show up, not even for this, not for him. They had abandoned him. And now I was here, in their place. Evelyn cleared her throat and began to read, her voice steady, but the words still hit me like a punch. "It is my desire that all my assets, including my estate, savings, and investments, be passed to my son-in-law, Brad Thompson. I entrust him with the responsibility of managing what I leave behind, as I believe him to be the only one with the strength and care to handle my affairs with dignity." I froze. My brain stuttered, unable to process the words. What? Everything. Everything was mine? Henry had given it all to me. There wasn't even a mention of Laura, not a cent for her, or her brothers or sisters. I glanced up at Evelyn, who was watching me closely, waiting for some sort of reaction. I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, but it couldn't make sense of what I was hearing. "Why?" I finally asked, my voice tight. "Why would he do this? Why would he leave everything to me?" Evelyn paused, then took a slow breath. "Henry had his reasons, Mr. Thompson, but I believe he saw things in a way that perhaps others did not." I was starting to feel nauseous. "He was my father-in-law," I said, though it felt more like a question than a statement. "Why not leave it to his children? Why me?" Evelyn's eyes softened, and for the first time, I could see the real weight of the situation on her face. Henry had been estranged from his family long before his death. The relationship with his children had deteriorated over the years, and while he loved them, he felt they had abandoned him. They were not there for him when he needed them most. And, well, he chose you, Brad, because he knew you. He trusted you. The words hit me like a truck, knocking the wind out of me. I thought back to the way Henry had been, so quiet, so withdrawn when I'd seen him last. But I never imagined it had gotten this bad. Not like this. I'd always assumed he had some sort of connection with his kids, even if they were distant. Now it was clear. Henry had spent his final years alone, cut off from his own flesh and blood, and in the end, he had chosen me. "Do you understand, Brad?" Evelyn asked, her voice low, almost pitying. "He left you as the executor of his estate for a reason. It wasn't just about the money. He needed someone who could handle the truth about his family, and someone who could make the decisions that needed to be made. He trusted you more than he trusted anyone else." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. The words stung, but they were true. Henry had seen something in me, something I didn't even know I had. And now I was left to deal with the fallout, not just from his death, but from everything that had come before it. His broken relationship with his family, his decision to cut them all out of his life. The weight of it all crashed down on me in that moment. I wasn't just dealing with an inheritance. I was walking into the middle of a war between Henry and his children that I'd never even known existed. Evelyn slid a copy of Henry's final wishes toward me. "Take this," she said quietly, "and when you're ready, we'll discuss the next steps." I stared at the paper in front of me, my hand shaking as I reached for it. As I touched the document, I felt the enormity of what Henry had left me. It wasn't just a house or a bank account. It was the responsibility to finish what he'd started, to deal with the wreckage of his family, and to figure out what the hell he'd been trying to protect me from. And somewhere deep inside, I knew. Henry had left me this mess for a reason. By the time I got home, the house felt colder than it had before. The lights were on, but everything about the place felt off. It felt like a stranger's house. And when I saw Laura sitting on the couch, flipping through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world, it hit me all over again. Her dad was dead, but she wasn't here. She wasn't with him. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just staring at her, and then I couldn't take it anymore. "Where the hell were you?" I demanded, the words spilling out before I could even stop them. She glanced up from her phone, her expression almost bored. What do you mean? You know what I mean. I couldn't help the frustration rising in my chest. You didn't show up, not once, not even when he was dying. Why weren't you there, Laura? She sighed, putting her phone down. Brad, I told you, I've been busy. You know how much work I have. And besides, you said he was in and out, and I didn't know it was that bad. She shrugged, like it was some casual thing to brush off. Busy? Really? Is that your excuse? My voice was sharp, more aggressive than I intended, but I didn't care. He was your father, Laura, and you couldn't even be bothered to show up, even at the end. She shot me a look, rolling her eyes. I'm here now, aren't I? She flicked her hair back and straightened her shirt, like she was more worried about her appearance than anything else. Anyway, it's not like he was close to us. You knew that, right? I stared at her, the reality of the situation sinking in deeper. That's how she saw him? A man she couldn't even be bothered to visit when he was dying? I wanted to scream, but instead, I gritted my teeth and walked over to the kitchen counter where I'd thrown the papers from the lawyer. I grabbed the will, slammed it down in front of her, and pointed at the section that mattered most. He left everything to me, Laura, not you, not your brothers, me. She blinked at the document and then, shockingly, she looked at it like it was just another paperwork hassle. Wait, what? Everything? Her voice had that light, dismissive tone, like this was some kind of joke. He didn't leave anything to me? No, I said flatly. Nothing? She stared at it for a second, then scoffed. Well, this is ridiculous. You really expect me to believe this? That he would leave you all of it? Not even a little for his own kids? It's real, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. This is what he wanted. Not you, not any of your siblings, just me. Laura's face twisted, and for a moment, I could see the mask crack. So, you're going to keep it all then? All that money, all that property? Her voice dripped with contempt. And you think I'm just going to accept that? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You think I wanted this? You think this is some kind of windfall for me? You weren't there for him when it mattered, Laura. Not when he was alive. And now you think you have a right to anything? Her expression changed again, like she was flipping a switch. So what? Now you're manipulating this situation, using my father's death for your own gain? Her eyes narrowed. Maybe you're just taking advantage of this whole thing. I felt my blood boil. I was done being patient. No, I'm not taking advantage of anything. I'm dealing with this mess because no one else bothered to. I'm the one who was there. I'm the one who dealt with him when you couldn't even pick up the phone. Laura was quiet for a second, but only for a second. Then she scoffed again, standing up, as if the conversation was beneath her. You're going to regret this, Brad. I'm telling you, you'll regret it. I stepped closer, glaring at her. I'm not going to regret anything, but I'm not giving you a damn cent, and I'm not sharing any of it with your family. Not after what you all did to him. He chose me for a reason. Not you, not your brothers, me. Her face went white, and I saw the anger flash in her eyes. Fine, she spat. You'll see how this plays out. You won't win. I turned away, too exhausted to argue anymore. As I grabbed my jacket to leave, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out without even thinking and saw a message from my lawyer. Laura and her siblings are already discussing contesting the will. They'll be sending a formal request soon. I didn't even look back at Laura. You're already trying to contest it, aren't you? I muttered, half to myself, half to her. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. I could already feel the storm coming. It didn't take long for Laura and her siblings to make their move. The lawsuit showed up a few days after our argument, thin and cold, like it was just another business deal to them. They were accusing me of exploiting Henry's wishes, claiming I had manipulated him, made him sign over everything to me when he wasn't in his right mind. The audacity of it. They didn't even pretend to be upset about their father's death. They were just furious they weren't getting a piece of the pie. I met with my lawyer, Peter, in his office the next morning. His face was as serious as always, but I could tell he understood how deep this ran. They're not going to make this easy, Brad, he said, shuffling through a stack of documents on his desk. But we've got everything we need to shut this down. I didn't know how to feel about the whole thing. Part of me wanted to back down, just to get the whole thing over with. But I couldn't. Not after everything that had happened. Henry had trusted me. He had chosen me for a reason, and I wasn't going to let his kids tear that down because they couldn't be bothered to show up. They've got nothing, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He was in his right mind when he signed that will. He knew exactly what he was doing. Peter nodded, flipping through the papers. Exactly. We've got psychiatric evaluations from Henry's doctor. Proof that he was fully aware of his decision when he made those changes. And the fact that he cut them out, well, it doesn't come as a shock when we start looking at the history of his relationship with them. I clenched my fists under the table. Henry had been clear with me, but I wasn't sure I was prepared for what was about to come. Laura and her family weren't going to back down without a fight. The court date came too quickly. Walking into that cold, formal courtroom felt like stepping into a nightmare. The air was thick with tension, the walls closing in on me. I'd been in and out of legal offices before, but this felt different. This was personal. Laura was sitting on the other side of the courtroom with her siblings, their faces as tight and cold as I'd ever seen them. There was no grief in their eyes, just anger. They couldn't believe their father had done this, and I could feel it burning through the air, hitting me with every glance they shot my way. Their lawyer was smooth, confident, like he was about to win a championship game. He stood up and started throwing accusations at me, claiming that Henry had been coerced, that I had somehow manipulated him into signing everything over to me. Each word felt like a slap in the face. I kept my eyes on Peter, who was calm, methodical. He didn't flinch when Laura's lawyer tried to twist the facts. "Your Honor," Peter said, standing and adjusting his glasses, "we have Henry's psychiatric evaluations from the time the will was updated. These documents clearly show that he was of sound mind and made his decisions without influence. The claim that he was coerced is baseless." The weight of it all sat heavy in my chest. I'd never wanted to be in this position, but here I was, fighting for something I never asked for, trying to keep everything from falling apart. The trial stretched on for what felt like forever. The opposing side kept pushing, kept trying to poke holes in Henry's final wishes, and I could feel the anger building inside me with every argument. It was like they were trying to rewrite the last chapter of Henry's life, and I wasn't about to let them. Finally, the judge made his decision. He didn't even look at the other side before he spoke. "The will is valid. I find no evidence to suggest undue influence or lack of capacity. The challenge is dismissed." I sat there, stunned for a moment, not sure if I could believe it. It was over. The will was upheld. The inheritance was mine. Not just the money, Henry's trust, the responsibility. I wanted to jump up and scream in relief, but instead, I just sat there, the tension melting away in slow waves. It wasn't over, though. Not really. Laura and her siblings were still my problem, but at least now I had the upper hand. As I walked out of the courtroom, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, seeing a message from Peter. "They're going to try to appeal. Get ready for round 2. I stuffed the phone back in my pocket. This wasn't over, but at least I had won the first round. And I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. The drive back to the cottage was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you've just survived a storm. I was drained, mentally, physically, emotionally. I felt like I'd been fighting for months, and now that the fight was over, all I wanted was to breathe, to let it go. But there was no letting go. Not yet. Not with everything still hanging in the air. I stepped inside the cottage, the door creaking like it always had, and paused. The place didn't look any different, but I did. I wasn't the man who had walked through here weeks ago, unsure of everything. I wasn't the guy who had been caught up in Laura's mess. I was the guy who'd won. And now it was my turn to decide what came next. I walked through the rooms, touching the dust-covered furniture, running my fingers over the faded photo frames. Everything here, everything Henry had left behind, was a reminder of the man he'd become at the end of his life. A man isolated, forgotten. He had been alone, abandoned by his own children, and I couldn't help but wonder if, somehow, he'd known that was coming. I couldn't change what had happened to him, but I could change what happened to this place. I stood by the window, staring out at the overgrown yard, the field beyond it. There was something here, a sense of purpose, of need. People needed help. People like Henry. Forgotten. Left behind by those who should have cared. I could feel it in my gut, a pull, a direction. The thought of it was strange at first, but as I walked through the rooms, it made more sense. This place, it wasn't just a house. It was a symbol. It could be something more. A community center. A place where people who were overlooked, who were abandoned, could find the support and care they needed. I wasn't doing this for anyone but myself, but the thought of giving it all a purpose felt right. Henry had never gotten the chance to feel that, but maybe I could make sure others didn't end up like him, alone, forgotten. As I started sorting through his things, organizing papers, I came across an old journal of his, filled with scattered notes about his life. I read through some of it, his thoughts, his regrets, his longings. He had been a man full of love at one point, but the world had worn him down. He'd been invisible, his love unreturned. And that's where I found my answer. Laura's voice came through my phone, buzzing in my pocket. I didn't even look at it. I knew what it was. Another apology, another plea. "I'm sorry, Brad. Can we talk? I need you back. We can work through this." I let it go to voicemail like I had with all her other messages. The truth was, I didn't need to talk. I didn't need her, not anymore. I had a life to build. I had a future to focus on. And this house, this piece of Henry's life, was the foundation I'd use to build something better. I put the phone down, walked to the door, and pulled it shut behind me with a finality I couldn't ignore. The past was gone. The inheritance was nothing compared to the power I held now, the power to make a difference. This was mine to shape, and I wasn't going to let it slip away.